Hello, I'm Kevin Benedict, Senior Analyst with the Center for the Future of Work here at Cognizant, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I'm very excited to have as our guest today Suhas Uliyar. Suhas is the Vice President of Mobile Products and Strategy at Oracle. He's also part of the Oracle's cloud platform, and he's an Internet of Things expert and a chatbot expert, which we're going to focus on today. Suhas, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kevin, for having me. A pleasure to see you again.
Absolutely. And I see here you're calling from Seattle and the sun's out.
Sun's out, yeah. It's been 2 days since we got the sun out here.
Oh, that's terrific. So, Suhas, tell me about chatbots. Chatbots, in a way, they're very similar, in my opinion, to almost like a word processing macro. But why are they on the front pages of everything today? Why are they such a big deal in 2017?
You know, it really comes down to a little bit of app fatigue today, Kevin. You know, if we saw this tremendous momentum and sort of very fast uptake of mobile apps the last decade or so, right? But fundamentally, we sort of have come down to using perhaps about 4 or 5 apps on a mobile device, maybe 5, right? I mean, I have like 10 pages of directories of mobile apps on my device, but I rarely even go to my second page, right? Mm-hmm. So we've come to this point of sort of app fatigue, number one. Number two is, you know, we've seen the momentum with B2C apps, right? But enterprises specifically are finding it a little bit challenging to sort of fork out the amount of money to build custom mobile apps for every single mobile business process within the enterprise, right? So they're looking at, for example, field service or consumer packaged goods, and they are ready to sort of spend the kind of money for complex processes. But when you come to sort of simple things like check my, you know, if I got paid for my expense, or how do I onboard someone very quickly, it's getting a little bit difficult for them to sort of think about spending that kind of money to do that, right? The other big vector that we see and shape that's happening in the industry today is you have these millennials come to work. I mean, you know, we were talking about your daughter, right? I have a daughter that's 16, and she has 4 apps on her device. She's got Snapchat, Instagram, she's got a game, and she's got Facebook Messenger so she can talk to old people like me, right? She doesn't want me anywhere near Snapchat or Instagram. And if you look at sort of our habits, sort of I spend most of my time communicating using WhatsApp or using SMS or Skype or Messenger. So when we look at all those aspects, right, the chatbot essentially is nothing but a virtual private assistant that's being responded by a computer. But what's really driving that force is the explosion of the number of channels out there, like Slack or HipChat or Messenger or WhatsApp, WeChat, Line, Telegram, Skype, you can go on, and the fact that these channels are being used by all the consumers and sort of beginning to use that channel over mobile apps. So that in together is sort of causing this whole microcosm of folks jumping and moving to the world of chatbots.
So you see all this fragmentation, but what's really interesting about chatbots is you go back to almost the simplest denominator, don't you?
You know what? It's very interesting. Someone told me this a few months back. Is chatbots is doing to the mobile apps is what the web did to client server apps. Right? If you think about sort of what was the common denominator going from your Win32 apps or Java-based apps or Forms-based apps to the browser, was that you had a unified interface, and what you focused on was your backend and making sure that you had that integrated, and you provided a really cool way of representing it within the browser. And that's what's really happening now in the world of chatbots, more driven by the channels. And if you look at Facebook Messenger, they have built some really cool UI components for cards, for carousels. Just recently, they also announced the fact that you can have a web view within Messenger. So now the sky's the limit, because you can very easily build a dynamic instant app, if you like, and have that embedded within the chatbot. And why is that important? A chatbot is really cool for very instantaneous conversation. That's why it's called a conversational UI. But if I were to ask you to fill a form for a credit card application or to report an accident for an insurance company, it's pretty tedious to go line by line and say, what's your first name, Kevin? What's my last name? Blah, blah, blah. But instead now, if I can have this sort of form embedded within my chat, and the chatbot was smart enough to know that, hey, now I can actually submit a form as part of a web view. Now that sort of takes care of, the structured data as well as the unstructured data component. And so that is what's become making the sort of the common denominator now.
Very good. So talk to me about your chatbot environment. What does it consist of? What does the solution stack look like?
Yeah, so for most part, most of chatbots have sort of 4 components, right? Component number 1 is a way to abstract out the communication to the channel, right? So whether it's using things like Alexa or Google Home or Siri from a voice perspective, or you're looking at Facebook Messenger, Slack, HipChat, etc., there is a certain level of inconsistencies among each of those channels. So the first aspect is an abstraction of how do you integrate to this channel. And more importantly, as you then send the information back, how do you easily construct the components so it can be presented in the right format within the channel, right? So one is the sort of the channel integration, the channel abstraction. The second part to this is sort of your dialogue flow, which is sort of how do you interact with the user? What's the conversational flow, the state management of it? So that's sort of your state engine, if you like, that manages the context of the conversations. The third is your artificial intelligence component that also breaks into a number of different algorithms. First is sort of your natural language processing, in which we use neural networks to determine a language-independent way of identifying or classifying what is the user's intent when they ask the question. Okay. So when you say, what's my balance to your bank, or hey, what gate is my plane flight going to take off from, is to understand the fact that you're trying to find out about a balance in your account, or trying to find out about your flight from a gate, right? So try to understand that in a very language-independent way. And that's based on neural networks and using vector algorithms for that. Then we pass it through another set of algorithms where we do linguistic modeling to understand the nuances of the different languages. And into that, we also add different algorithms that determine things like sentiment, for example. User upset, or if someone types in uppercase and noticing that they're upset, or using emojis of frowning faces or red faces, right? So that's sort of the second part of the algorithm, which sort of understands and sort of sharpens the probability of what the user is asking for. Once that happens and we understand that construct, that algorithm then does what we call entity extraction. So that is sort of where we break up the request from the user, and because it's unstructured in that way, and try to create a structured document that we can send to some REST API so we can go fulfill it from the system of record. So that's sort of breaking it, for example, saying, what's my balance in savings? Breaks it up into, okay, I'm asking for Kevin's balance, and the entity type is of type savings. Right. So we create that into an API, and that goes down to the fourth component, which is now our integration component. And one of the main things that we've thought through here, Kevin, is it was very important that we create a consistent platform that allows us to surface data to multiple channels. So as you know, that when I joined Oracle, the first platform we built was called the Mobile Cloud Service. Right. Was to be able to make it very simple and easy for mobile developers to consume data from the enterprise for your mobile channels and add things like push, sync, etc. So we've used the same platform now and added artificial intelligence on top of it. So we can use the same constructs of the API, which is mobile optimized. So now I can reuse the same APIs for my bot channel as well. So that's sort of the component, which is the fourth component of our platform that allows you to go get data from the backend and then match it to the way the data should be represented in the front end, being, whether it's Facebook Messenger or Alexa or whatever else you have there.
So theoretically, or maybe not just theoretically, maybe in reality, you can reach out to multiple databases anywhere, maybe a weather database, maybe a traffic database, all kinds of different databases and incorporate that data based on location, everything else, right into a conversation, couldn't you?
Absolutely, and that's a key part of any mobile application, right? So what makes mobile different is the context you bring to it, right? So there's data that the enterprise has, whether it's on-prem or in cloud, or, and rather, augmenting it with sources of data that the customer doesn't own, like weather or mapping software or whatever. And having built that fundamental platform, now your bot can also be very intelligent in asking those questions and making contextual sort of relationships between that. And this is a very important point you make, Kevin, and I believe what differentiates the way we've approached bot is the fact that our contextual state engine and our AI engine is built together. And why is that important is because, the human thinks like a human. I don't want my bot to think like a human because I don't want to fool the end user. But if I'm a human, I tend to think in multiple thoughts of chain of thoughts, and I tend to meander between these thoughts. So let's take an example of this, right? So let's say I want to pay the babysitter, and the bot will respond back with, well, which account do you want to pay the babysitter from? And I say, my checking account. And then suddenly I realize, hey, actually, you know what? I don't know what my balance is in my checking account. So I'm going to flip my chain of thought and I'm going to ask the bot, well, how much do I have in my checking account? The bot may respond, well, you got $100, sir. And I said, where did I spend my money? I thought I had $1,000. Can you show me my last 5 transactions? Can you show me sort of if my check cleared? Right? But I started at pay the babysitter.
Right.
Now I'm okay. I say, okay, well, go ahead and pay the babysitter. And so I need to be able to jump back into all of that. And that is very important because the bot needs to understand that as a human, interacting with a human, you're going to go off into different chains of thoughts or different flows of state. And so it's very important to manage and maintain that without the developer having to code all of that. And that's the most important part is if you leave this to the developer, 6 months later or a year later, you're still coding all of these.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. When you add voice to it, so instead of just texting somebody, a chatbot through texting, you add a voice. How does that work? What's the integration there? And let's pull back the curtains a little bit and see what's going there.
Actually, it's quite simple, Kevin. We actually took the lazy man's approach to this, right? So what does Alexa, what does Siri, what does Cortana give us, right? It gives a speech to text, right? So what we do is we front end. So we have integration to Alexa. Actually, she's sitting right here.
Yes.
Keeping quiet. Thank God for that. And what we do is, so when we integrate with Alexa, we actually don't use Alexa's skills to do the processing. We just sort of ask Alexa for the speech to text, right? Once it converts into text, it's no different than you typing it either using SMS or Skype or Facebook Messenger. And once we have the text, it's the same architecture in the back end. Now, when we send the response back, we send the response back to Alexa or to Siri or to Cortana, and that converts the text to speech on the reverse side.
Wow, that's fascinating. Now, when I was a freshman in Southwest Washington State a long time ago, I took symbolic logic. Symbolic logic, right, is a way of kind of defining English in logical terms. Is that really what's going on behind the scenes?
I would say that we've moved to more sort of vector-based algorithms now. So in the old days, when sort of the only options were to take nuance engines and then define a dictionary and do rules-based, people still do that. I mean, but the problem with that approach is you got to define a pretty large dictionary, right? And you got to define your semantics of every possible combination, permutation, combination. And you do keyword searches, which is very, very, very long and very tedious.
Right.
So here what's happened is you're sort of into more sort of what's called vector classifications, where you sort of create this vector map and you try to sort of weight what you're looking to or what you're translating to sort of a group of clusters of similar things. And then you try and weight your probability based on that. So it's like deep learning and using sort of sentence to paragraph or a paragraph vectors to go, or a sentence vectors and paragraph vectors to sort of figure out what is the best match and how these algorithms look in terms of vectors and identify that.
Got it. So let's go back to the contextual relevance and personalization. So based on your phone number, theoretically, you can have a chat bot that would say, Suhas,
Absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed the sun this morning. Go Mariners.
Yeah, absolutely. Although they didn't do well last night, but yeah, they will this year.
Yeah. So because it knows you're in Seattle and knows it's sunny, you can incorporate that right into a conversation and make it almost human.
Absolutely. Absolutely right.
That's
And also being able to sort of look at, the most important thing, and actually when you look at, human chat, and I prefer to use human chat compared to calling people anymore. And the most frustrating aspect of that is they always start with, sorry, what's your name?
Yes.
Right? They already know, I've put all this information, right? And so one of our key aspects of also our bot is to know when the bot is unable to respond to a user. And it's very important to know that. And we've put some very interesting analytics around that. We call it operational analytics that sort of looks at a bot and is able to identify in real time whether a bot is struggling or is it working fine. Now, if it's struggling, we are able to sort of capture that information and all the conversational logs that have happened and immediately put that into the queue of a human agent. Because the last thing you want is the user to be really, really upset with your brand. And so we pass that. But at the same time, we can in real time sort of look at why is the bot not actually classifying or being able to understand or resolve that intent and fix it in real time. So this also sort of changes the programming paradigm, because in real time, you can be actually changing the way your algorithm is behaving by looking at all these dashboards in real time and really understanding the conversational logs and importing them back in.
It is fascinating to me that you had said earlier, Suhas, that you have that sentiment layer that can analyze the context and the words coming out of the conversation and define it as happy, sad, discontent, frustrated, all those things. And now that can branch out the conversation based on sentiment and have a whole different kind of conversation. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, as I talk about, whenever you're talking to someone, you want to bring them to an adult level conversation, right?
Yes.
People usually, especially in the customer service scenarios, typically they're irate when they are trying to talk to somebody, either because it's some problem they're trying to solve or they're waiting in the queue for a long time, right? So our whole the point there is, can we sort of take this emotion out of this conversation, as in bring them down to a level where it's an adult to adult conversation, where we smoothen that conversation and then find a way to further increase the upsell opportunity or the wallet size, right? And that is very critical, because a lot of the first deployments that we're seeing of the bot is sort of a virtual private assistant. It's to sort of take 60 to 70% of the sort of the mundane or boring sort of back and forth that happens in human chat and try to move that into an automated bot. But as you think about this, right, the bot now becomes the brand or the front end of the brand. So you don't want a separate bot for customer service or a separate bot for marketing. Now, what the bot is doing, the chatbot market is doing, is it's bringing these different lines of businesses together. So you want to be able to have this profile and be able to then sort of say, hey, while you're having a customer service problem, I can also help raise the awareness of other products out there and be able to bring that up. And that's why sentiment analysis is very critical to that entire sort of flow.
So the chatbot can, in effect, have a persona, and that persona can be connected to all the lines of business.
Correct.
And once you've already had this in-depth conversation, you don't have to go back just because the question now involves a different line of business. You don't have to start from stage one again and start asking who you are and all that. You can carry forward the whole series of conversations you've had.
Absolutely.
Even the whole history of conversations going back months. Bring
Indeed.
that into the next conversation. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's powerful.
Indeed.
It occurs to me that this is, some significant percentage along the way to getting actually a humanoid or some kind of robot, because you've built the intelligence behind the scenes. Now you would just connect those sentiments and everything else to a facial expression, and you've almost got the brains of a robot.
I think that's sort of where it's going to go over time.
Yeah.
I think there is so much. I think, I sort of look back 2 years ago. I was experimenting with this type of technology in the world of mobile apps, right?
Yes.
Trying to use voice and speech as a way to interact with data, right? And I would say that the technology wasn't quite mature to the point like we discussed earlier, right? I mean, there was nuance and there was all these libraries that I had to create. But I mean, as you see now, and even as you see the open source world, there's so many all these algorithms out there, and every sort of day I read something new that sort of is sort of tying to artificial intelligence and different algorithms. That, yeah, I mean, we can do image recognition today. It's very easy to sort of look at someone's face and understand, if they're upset or angry. And so I think over a period of time, this whole world is going to get into this level of understanding who you are, what you are, how do you feel, and be able to respond back in an appropriate way.
Wow. Have you seen any scenarios where you have multiple chatbots or chatbot personas in a conversation together with a customer? Is there
I wouldn't say separate personas, but we do have this concept of a bot hierarchy, not necessarily with that end customer, but in a sort of more of an enterprise scenario, right? So, for example, we have bots to HCM. We have bots to ERP. We have a bot to Salesforce. I mean, to your Salesforce group, right? And so a sales CRM group. So when you look at all these different sort of ERP, CRM, HCM type groups, you want the bot to sort of specialize in that particular subject matter expertise, right? So you want to ask, hey, as a salesperson, what are the next four deals I should be working on, right? Or change my probability to 80% from 30%, right? So that bot really understands the language of sales CRM. Same thing with HCM. I want to onboard, hey, how do I set my 401k, right? Now take a step up, right? And you sort of, as you join an organization, you can have this master bot that is sort of orchestrating between these bots, right? So for example, your expense management may be coming from an ERP, but so perhaps it's tied to your HR system in some way, like your vacations, right? And so being able to orchestrate between the bots, so we've actually built this, what we call the master bot, that is able to understand the state of each bot and to be able to orchestrate and route it between these bots as well. So I'm not sure about having different personas, that they'll have different domains of expertise, but we'll have a super bot that is basically able to orchestrate between these bots.
Great. Well, Suhas, you've enlightened all of us, and I want to thank you so much for your wisdom and walking us through all these steps in a chatbot. I can think there's a million different business cases here to utilize this. I've had some fun creating a chatbot myself. But with that, I want to thank you so much, Suhas.
Thank you for your time, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Bye-bye.